see what's going on up there, but that was just an example of the rampant abuse here in Austin. Institutional violence, and this isn't a new thing for Austin, and it's not a new thing for around the rest of the country. And next we're going to hear from Rene, Valdez, who represents the books, and he's going to chat about some of the history behind this institutional violence and how it's a myth that the police exist to protect and serve you and I. In reality, they exist to protect and serve the corporation, the city of Austin, which is a corporation, right? So is the United States of America. So without further ado, Rene Valdez, thank you for coming out and supporting this movement. We're glad you're part of it. Rene Valdez represents the movement.
So my name is Rene Valdez, and I was invited to speak here at this summit. I wanted to open up the space in the way that our elders taught us, to thank the Great Spirit and Creator for another day on this earth, to thank our ancestors, those who came before us, to thank our elders, our grandmas and grandpas for the hard work and the sacrifices they made for our benefit, for opening up the doors for us, and of course to the youth for giving us the spirit and energy and the hope. And also I want to recognize and remember those who remain in the cages, in the prisons, in the detention centers, in jail, on parole, and on probation, and also recognize those survivors of police and state violence. I want to thank the Chicas and the owners, Jose and Gilbert Rivera, for opening up this space. They are our elders, they're activists, organizers, and carriers of our stories and of our people's history of East Austin. I also want to thank all the workers who prepared the food, all the organizers who are doing all this wonderful, important, bringing people together and setting it up for all of us today. And of course, to you for coming here to do important work in our communities, to empower, to educate, to inspire, to vision a world without cops and without prisons, and most importantly, safe communities for our mothers, our children, our queer people, and for humanity. And before I move on, I'm going to ask a difficult question, and some of us may think it's funny, but I think we have to really come to terms with this. So, how many of you are a police informant? Someone from the state hired to surveil this place? We know you're here, and we hope you come to us and let you know who you are, because eventually we will find out who you are. So we can't kid ourselves, because as soon as they find out or they know that 100 video cameras are going out to the streets, they're going to be here and they want to know what's going on. So, my name is Rene Valdez. I come from an area that's a militarized zone. I'm from La Frontera, I'm from the borderlands, I'm from a place that if you try to travel south, there's a checkpoint, there's a border control. If you try to travel west, there's a checkpoint. If you try to travel east, there's a checkpoint. I grew up in a place that was militarized. I grew up in a place where poor people trying to survive, trying to make it across the border to improve themselves and their families, were brutalized, killed, or locked up. I personally have seen this happen since I was a boy. And so, connecting that, I want to ask some important questions about the origins of what we understand as the modern day police force, especially in the South. Where did they come from and how did they emerge? And if you just, use this thing called the internet and do a little Google search or whatever you want to find, however you want to look it up, you'll find out that initially they were slave patrols. The right to bear arms gave these white masters the power to go about to kill slaves, lynch them, capture them, and that's how the police today still functions. And I say that because we only have to refer to a new study which just came out, and it was done by the Malcolm X grassroots movement, and they have documented that since January 1st, 2012 up until June 30th, 2012, there has been 110 extrajudicial killings of black people in the United States. And when we say extrajudicial, we're meaning killings done by police, security guards, or people who are self-appointed police. And so when we think about the police, I also think about who are they really trying to control and why are they doing what they are doing. I also want to ask how this idea of the APD or the police is also connected to a greater web of policing in this country. From the Texas Rangers, who, if you choose to look up their origins, were put together to protect the colonial settlers here in Texas by Stephen F. Austin, to kill Indians and also to kill Mexicans. And so it's important for us to know our history. I bring this up because I think we need to develop a very sophisticated analysis of how policing works, from the border patrol to the police, to even within our own schools, education facilities. And I bring up our own schools because my work is primarily with young people who are locked up. And guess who are the majority of those young brothers and sisters who are locked up? They're black and brown. And so how does these types of policies, zero tolerance policies, the war on drugs, how are they connected to pushing our young people out of the educational facilities and into a lifetime of lockup? That's what I'm concerned about. I'm interested and concerned about those most vulnerable under these laws. These laws, the war on drugs, zero tolerance, they were designed to control, to oppress our populations. And I hope that we see more black and brown brothers and sisters come together to strategize ways of self-defense. And so I applaud you all because I see this as a form of self-defense. And if you read more and more radical and revolutionary call-outs, they're asking for ways of how do we defend our communities from the police, from these institutionalized racist and violent policies that affect the future of our young people. The bookstore that I work for, the Central Bookstore, was founded by Raul Salinas. He was raised in East Austin, and he was a survivor of the Jim Crow era. He spent 12 years of his life in some of the most notorious prisons in this country, and he dedicated his life to the people, to empower, to inspire, and also to educate. And so my message for us today is to research even what I'm saying, because we need this most importantly. We need this in our hearts before we start engaging with the police. And as I talk about our history and those who came before us, I also want to encourage us to check out other strategies and other groups in this country who have been doing this type of work when it comes to state or police violence in their communities. And of course, we think about groups like the Brown Berets, the Black Panthers, the American Indian Movement. Well, after the FBI and COINTEL and the state came down on us, there were other groups that emerged. And so one group that I want to draw attention to is called CAPA, the Coalition Against Police Violence and Accountability. And this is just an example. If you look at this book called Catching Hell in the City of Angels, Life and Meaning of Blackness in South Central Los Angeles, they're who we are and what we do is in here. And Michael Zizou, who's now in the spirit world, was an ex-Black Panther who dedicated his whole life against police brutality because he saw what it did to his people in South Central Los Angeles. And so just an example, statement of purpose. Whereas for as long as we can remember, poor people, especially in the Black and brown communities, have been victims of abusive and criminal acts committed by racist police officers. Whereas the present pattern of police terror is well established, taking the form of senseless beatings, brutal murders, illegal and unconstitutional stops, searches, and arrests. Whereas lurking behind these cases of murder and oppression lies a worsening economic and political crisis in which the government, guided by a false notion of law and order, has begun to legislate and order through the courts more repressive acts by the police. Whereas by legislating away the few human rights we have won through constitutional amendments, the government has put more and more power into the hands of the police. Be it resolved that the coalition against police abuse has been formed by community people who feel that the reign of terror by the police has remained unchecked far too long, and that it is time to let the authorities know that we will no longer tolerate the senseless harassment, injury, and murder of community people by the police, and that we have resolved as our main purpose to organize and mobilize the masses in the Black and brown communities as well as other poor communities through block clubs, church groups, labor committees, youth groups, women's groups, gay organizations, senior citizen clubs, and concerned individuals and families organized against police terrorism in our communities. 1980s and the early 90s. So there it is, very clear what the police has done and what they want to do. And so in like manner, I applaud you all for bringing different groups, and hopefully they can only inspire more of this mobilizing amongst our people. And so I also want to talk just real briefly that this work against police abuse has been going on in Austin for a very long time. There is a film that you can look on YouTube called The Days of Klan March, which was a march up onto the Capitol that the Ku Klux Klan got permission from the city council to do a march to the Capitol. And so what it did, it inspired a coalition of Black and brown and other groups to do a counter march, which Paul and Valdez will probably speak on later on this afternoon. But you can check it out on YouTube. But what was going on at that time, where it was understood that the Ku Klux Klan members were also members of the police force. And so those of us in the black and brown community understand the seriousness of white supremacy and how white supremacy these days are institutionalized in our laws and our policies that affect our neighborhoods. And so, for an example, I want us to draw and look at the Chronicle and how they portray our people. So, right in the latest one, 12th Street in Chicago, right? What are we going to do about it? The neighborhoods want more police. They want more police. And they've been pushing this so-called drug trade, and it's been in our neighborhoods for a long time. But they say, well, in the past, 12th Street and 11th Street was a vital, economically important place for the black community. Well, what happened? They don't talk about why is it no longer like that. Because we know that these policies, economic policies of de-investment, they stop investing in our neighborhoods, they stop giving us what we deserve, and they become blighted zones. And then they decide, well, now we want it back. And so some of the first ways that they take it back is they start cleaning up our neighborhoods. And one of the ways they do that is the way they portray our people in the press. I mean, is this ironic? On one page they show Byron Carter, who was killed by the APD, and then the owner of Bolitas, who is now being accused of this huge drug lord, on one page. And I was going through the Chronicle trying to find other images of our black and brown brothers and sisters. But they don't seem to add up, the messages. So I also want us to check out other groups besides the Brown Berets. There was also a group in Austin called the Black Citizens Task Force. They were also very instrumental in fighting against police abuse and other types of institutionalized racism. And some of the individuals, they were women, Dorothy Turner and Delta Roberts. They were very important community members in our neighborhoods that were our leaders. And so, last, I want to finish by drawing some connections between one individual. His name was Santos Rodriguez. In 1973, this Chicanito, this young Chicano kid who lost his parents, he was a foster kid in Dallas, was accused of breaking into a soda fountain machine. And so a white police officer picked up him and his brother and said, tell me the truth. Did you break into this machine? And he said, no. He said, you're lying. He stuck a gun to his head. Did you do this? No. And he pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. I'm going to ask you again. Did you break into the soda machine? No. And he stuck the gun to his head again. And guess what happened? Blew off his head. And so the report comes out that there was no fingerprints that matched him and his brother to that soda fountain machine. And the cop eventually only got 5 years. But the only reason why he got 5 years at least was because there was a strong coalition between Dallas and Austin speaking out against this police abuse. And I don't even know if that's justice for me. Send a police officer to prison, I don't know if that's justice. Because some of the work that we do, we're against prison. Because if we look at the prison industrial complex, who are the ones going to prison? There's 2.3 million people in our prisons, and who are they? Black and brown folks. And some of the fastest rising population are black and brown women. And so when we talk about the peaceful streets, how can we make our streets and our communities most safe for women, especially women of color and queer folks? They're the ones who are the most vulnerable to the mechanisms of state violence. And so I also would like to ask people to check out this resources by a group called Insight. And they have a website and you can get this information. But they have all this information about law enforcement violence against women of color and trans people of color. A critical intersection of gender violence and state violence. We can't forget them. So going back to Santos Rodriguez, how is that different than from Nathaniel Sanders getting shot in the head too for being asleep and allegedly having a gun? Allegedly. They never proved he had a gun. How is that different from Byron Carter? And then also I got to remember Devin Contreras. No one talks about Devin Contreras. He was in Chicago who was accused of breaking into the big lots in South Austin. A young 15-year-old kid accused of breaking into the big lots. This just happened a couple years ago, and he got shot in the back. And the only reason why I bring his name up is because he was friends to a lot of the young people that we work with. And they still mourn his death. They still mourn his death. So, last, I want to end with our vision. What is our vision? I want to be able to imagine a world in my community with no police. I also want to imagine a world with no prisons. I want to imagine a world where our young people, especially our black and brown, can get the history and the knowledge that they need to become informed people in our communities in order to create a new world that's more humane, where we can have respect, dignity, and justice. So I thank you all, and thank you to the organizers. Thank you.